Disclaimers for this episode are as follows. I am not a psychologist, I am just a psychology enthusiast, and even then, you should not be making any comments based off of my opinions that I state here, as they are just opinions based off of pure speculation. So please, any conversations that you will be having about these women, please keep them to this YouTube page or the Spotify page where you can comment. Please do not take those comments or these opinions or assumptions over to the individual pages of the women that we are going to be talking about. And please do not make any actions based off of what I'm going to be discussing here, because we don't actually know. We are not experts and we do not know these people. Thank you. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Lily's Little Life Corner. Today we are going to be talking about the various bad husbands that you find all over social media, but in particular TikTok. That is the topic of discussion for today. Again, there will be nothing written on my whiteboard because I still don't really know how to design my whiteboard, so please ignore that. But yeah, I just wanted to remind you guys that my merch is linked in the description, as well as my new Tumblr page, which I talked about last week, but that is where you can now get updates on my schedule. And also, once enough people follow the Tumblr page, I think I can also do polls and questions like, what do you guys want to see? What do you want me to cover, right? And so then you can participate in those. Give me ideas for what you might want to see. I just wanted to remind you guys of that. Let me get into the podcast episode because we have a lot of TikToks to watch today. But this is actually episode 1 of a 3-part series on bad husbands. So in this episode, we will be talking exclusively about bad husbands. In the next episode, we will be talking about the hate that relationships get on social media. And in the third episode, we will be talking about female influencers that maybe are doing more harm than good. So I hope you guys stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's get into the episode. Okay, so the first TikTok that we are going to be watching and talking about is a TikTok that kind of requires a lot of nuance and a lot of thinking about both sides of the equation. We can't just hear out the woman, we also have to think about what her husband thinks about this and kind of put ourselves in the husband's shoes a little bit. So this TikTok was uploaded by a woman who is having cold feet about her marriage. It's 7 years into the marriage, but she is kind of doubting whether she should have gotten married at all. So let's watch.
It's just not worth it dealing with someone else every single day of your life. Every day. Every day you gotta deal with somebody. Is marriage even worth it? It's not. It's not. At some point you're gonna realize that it's always best to just be alone. Because I've been married for about 7 years and I don't even know if this is worth it. And not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong. There's nothing wrong, and that's the point. I don't even know why I am upset. I'm just not thinking that I made the right decision. And I am a good man. I do. And that's not the point. The point is it's you really do lose yourself. You lose your sense of individuality. You lose your sense of peace. And this could be even to a good man. You're gonna lose something, and I don't think it's worth it, at all. I've always had a dream of, getting out of my hometown, city, and moving on, moving forward, life is supposed to be experience, we're supposed to be doing new things, and traveling, and all that, and I do all of that. But at some point, I don't know if I want to continue doing this every single day of my life. Always checking in with someone, always having to consider their feelings, it's always somebody else. You're never alone. You never have a moment to yourself. You never can do that. And I don't know, like, and there's gonna be some bitches out there that say, like, oh no, you should not. No, like, be fucking weird and not a real ass couple. But I really want girls to know, like, even if it's absolutely worth it, I don't think it is. Even if you found the most perfect man, it's not worth it. It's not, like, it's always gonna be best to just, like, be alone. And maybe that's why so many men tell older women they're gonna die alone and be so sad. I'm sad with a great man. Like, maybe it's just, like, not my personality. And, like, I know girls are out there and they're, like, dying for, like, a relationship like mine. Like, he takes care of me, but, like, I'm sorry, like, you can't, like, I can't even really barely deal with myself and my own emotions. Imagine somebody that you know for such a short amount of time, because you're never gonna know that man like you think you do, and that's just not in a negative way. Like, I just don't think marriage is for me, and I'm tired of it, and I don't know what else to do, because this is like imagine living a fairy tale and it's nothing like you imagined it. You're living your literal fairy tale, and it's not what you want. It's not what you want. Even if you think that you want it, even if it's exactly what you dreamed of, it's still just, I don't know.
So that was a TikTok that inspired me to do this episode. And basically, there were two different lines of thinking. The first line of thinking was, well, girl, you gotta divorce him. You're clearly not happy with him. He might be a great man, but you're not happy with him. You gotta divorce. The second line of thinking was men, mostly men, I should say, saying that she was being really rude to her husband and that this was sort of unexpected to her husband. And one thing I want to make clear is that we don't actually know if she has talked to her husband beforehand, but I do see where they're coming from in the sense that it would hurt my feelings. Whether or not I had talked to my spouse about these feelings that they were having, it would hurt me to see that all of a sudden my spouse was posting things about our relationship and how unhappy they were in our marriage. So I do understand where they're coming from, but one question I want to pose to you guys is, do you think her husband is as great of a man as she says he is? That is one thing that I had to come to terms with when I was watching this TikTok. At first, I took her word for it and I thought, okay, well, he's probably a really great husband. Great husbands exist out there. They are not an anomaly and they do exist, and I'm sure every single one of us could find a great husband. However, I later found a TikTok on her TikTok page where she said that her husband denied her having a hysterectomy. Here is that TikTok so that you guys can see for yourself.
Put a finger down if you went to your doctor today because you got bit in the face by a mosquito, so half of your face is swollen. So you're there with your husband, but while you're there at the doctor, a week ago you went to go get blood work done because you wanted to gift yourself for your 30th birthday tube tying or a hysterectomy. But while you're there, because get things done while you're there, your doctor gives you your results. Tells you that your blood work is great, your BMI is great, everything is perfect about you. But because your husband is there and he did not know, and he wasn't informed of this decision, because this is my body and it's my choice, and by federal law, you do not have to have consent from your husband to do this procedure. You thought everything was going to go perfectly fine. But because your husband is there, even though you guys both agreed before you got married that you didn't want to have children, but you decided to wait until you were old enough and mature enough to make that decision, that is why I wanted to gift myself my 30th birthday, because now I know for 100% fact that I don't want to have children. So your doctor comes in with 2 consent forms to go through with the procedure, so you're a little bit confused. Before you got married, you both agreed that you didn't want to have children before you got married. But somehow, I got denied. And guess who denied you? Your husband. So this is what happened. I was already at the doctor for seeing another issue. This doctor and this doctor, my OBGYN, are two separate people, but they work at the same office. That is why they gave me the paperwork to sign, because I was already there. I don't believe they did anything wrong. Do I believe that this doctor had any malicious intent to do this? No. But it is also naive in me to think that way. So I will be talking to my OBGYN about the behavior of this doctor. But I also don't blame this doctor, because without his intentions or his lack of intention for giving out a consent form that he probably should have never done, I would have never known that that was a decision that my husband would have made. And the only reason why I know that that was the decision that he made is because when he left after I got discharged to go get the car to come pick me up at the front, I looked at the paperwork. I would have never known that would have been his decision until I looked at it. So after that, he went to work. I went home, I packed a little bit of my stuff, and I stayed the night in a hotel. I have not spoken to him about it. He does know that I am upset about something, but also he is equally upset because I did not tell him that I was going to get the procedure done. Am I wrong for not telling him about a major surgery? Maybe, yeah. But also, it was a gift to myself. So, to me, when I make decisions about my body, I am not considering anybody else other than me, because it's my body. I don't know what I'm going to do. I still have to have a conversation with him. I need to talk to my parents. I need to go see a counselor. I need to go see a therapist about this, because this is something that's deep. So, I don't know. And I have no answers for you guys right now other than what I just said earlier. So, I'm not perfect. And I'm still young.
This issue poses more questions entirely. For example, is it okay for you to get a major invasive surgical procedure without telling your spouse? What if you've already kind of talked to your spouse about this? Like she said, they both went into the marriage knowing that they were going to be child-free. So wouldn't it stand to reason that your wife would get a hysterectomy or that the husband would get a vasectomy? And would it be okay then to get those surgical procedures without informing the spouse? One question that came to mind as I was watching these TikToks of hers was, well, what if she didn't tell her husband because she kind of already knew his reaction? Sure, it is one thing to say, well, it's my body, my choice, I can get whatever medical procedures I want. And maybe that kind of goes with the theme of her first TikTok, where she's saying, I don't want to check in with him anymore. I hate having someone that I need to check in with. I hate having to tell someone everything that I'm doing at every single moment that I'm planning on doing it. But it still is concerning that she didn't feel like she needed to tell her husband, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, did she not feel the need to tell her husband because she kind of knew what his reaction was going to be? Or is it that she's checking out of the marriage because she hates checking in with her husband? And ultimately, the biggest question or the biggest thing that I want every one of us to keep in mind is that we don't actually know what is going on in their relationship. And like I already kind of said when we watched the first TikTok, we really only know her side. After these TikToks were uploaded onto her page, more and more people started telling her that she needed to divorce her husband. She admitted, like I showed you guys in the TikTok, that she still hadn't talked to her husband about this issue and that he had no idea why she was upset with him, but that he knew that she was upset with him. A few months after those TikToks were uploaded, she uploaded another TikTok saying that her husband had created a scavenger hunt for their trip to Aruba. So it looks like they are on good terms, and it looks like they are nowhere near divorcing, or maybe they are in those stages where they're trying to work the relationship out and trying to see if the marriage will work. But for the most part, it looks like they are not going to divorce. And I think it is that. I think it is them working through their issues and them trying to figure out if the relationship is going to work or not. But I wanted to start this conversation off with this particular creator because this conversation with her husband and these issues that she's having with her husband are far more nuanced than the issues that the other women are having with their husbands. I feel like with the other women, you can safely say, okay, you guys need to divorce. And maybe with her too, she's clearly unhappy in the relationship. So maybe you can for sure say, okay, you guys need to divorce. But with the other women that we're going to be talking about today, we're saying you really need to divorce your husband because he sucks. But with this woman, we're saying you really need to divorce your husband because you're unhappy with him. So it's a little bit different, but it kind of still sets the tone for the conversation that we're going to be having anyway. So I thought it would be interesting to start the conversation off with this TikTok. Also, as we're talking and discussing these women, I also want you to keep in mind that a lot of these women and just people in general have this idea that marriage is something that you do. Marriage is something that you do once you reach adulthood, and everybody does it. So a lot of the times, people who get married when they reach adulthood, or people who strive for marriage when they reach adulthood without really thinking about marriage, go into marriage because they haven't really thought about whether marriage is for them, which poses a really big issue when issues in a relationship start to occur and these people kind of don't know how to handle it. A lot of the media that we consume today informs those decisions that we take and tells us that we have to not only strive for a marriage, but we have to keep said marriage. There's more media about teenagers marrying their high school sweetheart than there is media of adults trying to refigure out their life once they reach divorce. And reaching divorce is so common. Like 50% of marriages end in divorce. My point is that as we keep talking about these women, you guys have to also keep in mind that these women are not just in the relationship just to be in the relationship. They're in the relationship because that's what they have been taught and that's what they have been told is something that they need to strive for. And divorce is portrayed as something very shameful. So a lot of these women tend to not want to even think about divorce because that would bring a lot of shame to them and their family. It's by design that you didn't think that marriage was going to be hard, that you didn't think that having kids was going to be hard, because the whole kind of point of capitalism, not to bring politics into this, but everything is political, the whole point of capitalism is to have workers, right? And so a society cannot have workers if the society is not having kids. So obviously media is going to prioritize young couples having kids over young couples exploring themselves, getting to know about each other, getting to know about themselves, figuring out if they actually really do want kids or if they don't want kids. And instead, whenever the birth rate is down, instead of saying, oh, well, maybe we should have more programs to benefit parents. Maybe parents should get more benefits. Maybe we should have free hospital stay, make it a law that if you are giving birth, you shouldn't pay any bills. Media outlets start saying, well, it's those damn radicals that are turning our kids gay or whatever, right? So in that sense, yes, I do feel bad for her because she, I feel, has fallen into that kind of propaganda where she's been told her whole life, you should only strive to have a husband. And again, she's not the only one who has fallen into that kind of propaganda. A lot of these women also come from cultures and backgrounds where religious beliefs tell them that they need to rush into marriage and rush into having kids. Marriage, especially coming from a religious background, is a lifelong commitment. But if you commit to that lifelong commitment when you are a teenager, you're less likely to understand who you are as a person, who the partner that you're marrying is as a person, and whether you two are even compatible. You're rushing into marriage not because you actually want marriage, but because that is the culture that you have been raised around. What's worse is that the crucial conversations that are necessary to find out if you're even compatible to get married are skipped over because you're so busy rushing into marriage. But yeah, I do feel bad for those couples that rushed into getting married because they were told that that's what they should achieve. I will share more of my tips in the third installment of this series, but I do want to share some important tips if you are thinking of getting married. Number one is think really hard about whether marriage is for you. Are you the kind of person that is going to resent commitment, or are you the kind of person that is going to commit so hard that it becomes toxic to you? Another thing that I want you to think about is the kind of person that you are marrying. If divorce is completely off the table for you, and if divorce is something that you believe is a sin or something that you absolutely do not want to do and never want to go through, then that is especially important. You need to understand the kind of person that you are marrying and what their coping mechanisms are and how they are looking at you. Are they interested in helping you, or are they interested in only helping themselves? Are you guys on the same page about divorce? Maybe you are on the side of I never want to get divorced, but the person that you're marrying has divorce as an option. That is an incompatibility, and that is something that you need to talk about. Another thing that I want you to do before you get married is to date your partner for as long as you possibly can, so that you understand the most that you can about your partner. Also, if divorce is on the table for you, I need you to think about what is divorce worthy to you and what you are willing to work through versus what you are not willing to work through. Oh, and then also make sure that they don't interfere in your fucking medical procedures because like that's not something that you just do willy-nilly. When you want to get a hysterectomy, you're not just like, this Thursday, I think I'm gonna get a hysterectomy. I think that sounds fun. No, you think about it, you do your research, you ask your doctor, if you go to your doctor and you say, hey, I want a hysterectomy, your doctor is gonna ask you, oh, why do you want a hysterectomy? Because it is an invasive surgical procedure. You can't just like call up your doctor, hey man, I want a hysterectomy, and your doctor is gonna be like, oh, for sure, come in, at your earliest convenience. No, because it's an invasive surgery that you have to be prepared for, and that you have to be prepared for the consequences for. And the consequences being not just losing your uterus, but also being under anesthesia. What is your recovery rate? Do you have thin blood? Do you use blood thinners? Because if you do, your recovery process is going to be longer and perhaps more dangerous. So it's not just something that women just decide out of the blue. It's something that you have to like really, and also it's not just women that decide to get hysterectomies, it's also trans people that decide to get hysterectomies. And it's, again, like I said, a surgical procedure that is highly invasive and that you need to be under anesthesia for. If you go through with the surgery and your uterus has been completely removed, and then say like a year, 2 years down the line, you're like, wait, I actually want kids. Oops. You no longer have a uterus. Like, you can't have kids anymore. Again, that would be divorce worthy for me. And I do think this woman should divorce her husband solely because he denied her that procedure. Like, that's crazy to me. But anyway, let's continue. I'm now 50 minutes into this episode, and we still have a bunch of TikToks to watch. These next few TikToks that we're going to watch, it's a compilation. So it's a bunch of different TikToks. This compilation of TikToks shows women unpacking lunches that their husband packed for them. Usually they're the ones to pack their own lunches, but for whatever reason, that day that they filmed that TikTok, they asked their husband to pack their lunches for them, and they're showing us what their husbands packed for them, and that's what we're going to be reacting to. And then I think the end TikTok is a TikTok of a woman whose husband packed her lunch thoughtfully for her. So we're also going to react to that one as well.
We have a bag of dog food. Because you're my dog. There's two, Joy. Please bring back the dogs are low on food.
So the first one, she was a teacher. She did not have time to pack her lunch the night before, so she asked her husband in the morning to pack her lunch. Her husband packed her leftover Chipotle and packed her dog food, and then stapled index cards onto the Ziploc bag of dog food and said, packing this because you're my dog, DAWG, dog. And then the other index card said, please bring the dog food back because the dogs are low on food. So a couple red flags with that. Number one is the actual food that he packed for her was leftovers. A lot of families pack themselves leftover food from the night before, from dinner before. So I'm not saying oh, leftovers, what are you, poor? you know? That's not my reaction. I would do a really bad job at explaining this, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that he didn't put in the extra effort to take the Chipotle out of the original takeout container and put it in a new Tupperware container. And often when you order takeout, you order it thinking that you're gonna eat everything. So it's likely that the Chipotle that he packed for her was half finished. So it had been unpacked the night before, eaten a little bit, and then packed again and put in the fridge, meaning she doesn't actually have a full Chipotle meal. She has half a Chipotle meal or a quarter of a Chipotle meal. And that is what I find issue with the way that he packed her lunch for her, and that's the way that he packed the actual food for her. Not that it was leftovers, but the way in which he packed leftovers for her. And then also what a lot of people were pointing out is that the dog food was at the very bottom of her lunch bag, which means that that's the first thing he reached for when he started packing her lunch. He didn't think of it as like an afterthought, like, oh, let me carefully pack my wife her lunch because, you know, she's a teacher. So let me make sure that my wife has the best food that I can possibly pack for her. And then, oh, you know what? We call each other dog. Wouldn't it be funny if I like include a bag of dog food, because that's our running joke or whatever, and then put it on top like as an afterthought? No, it was the first thing he packed. The first thing he thought of was dog food, and then as an afterthought he packed her real food. But yeah, and then also something that people were pointing out is that the second index card says, please bring this dog food back because our dogs are running low on food. And it's like, okay, if they're running low on food, do you expect her to, after her work day of being an overworked teacher, to also run to the store and pick up dog food? You couldn't even properly pack her lunch, and now you're telling her, yeah, and I'm also not gonna pick up more dog food for the dogs, even though the dogs are ours. But anyway, so that's the first TikTok in this compilation. Let's watch the second TikTok in this compilation.
You think you've seen it all, and then you open your lunchbox.
For those of you who are not watching, the only thing in her lunchbox is a giant eggplant. It hasn't been cooked, it hasn't been cut up, it probably hasn't even been washed. It's just a giant eggplant in her lunchbox.
A Diet Coke, and $20. Thanks, honey, for the lunch.
Wow. For those of you that are only listening, the Diet Coke and the $20 bill are the only thing that are in her bag. And then she says, thanks, hun.
And one hard bullet.
This next one, she reached into her lunch bag, got a little ball of foil, and then she unpacks the foil, and it turns out it's an egg. So obviously the thought is, you know, you and I and this woman are thinking, oh, it's a hard-boiled egg. So naturally what she does, thinking that it's a hard-boiled egg, she cracks it on the table where she's sitting at. And it also looks like she's also a teacher. So she cracks the egg. Turns out it's a raw egg. And you can see, well, if you're not watching, she looks so shocked. There is egg whites all over the table that she's at, and she has to reach for a garbage can to throw it in because it is unedible. And she shows herself dumping the egg out, and the egg yolk just falls out. It's completely raw, and she looks so confused. She looks so shocked and like appalled that would even be something that he would do. She looks like, if I may speculate, she looks angry as well. So this next one,
Oh no, that's not.
she starts off by saying, oh no. Let's see what that's about.
A Diet Dr. Pepper.
Pulls out a Ziploc bag with a Tupperware container inside of a Ziploc bag. But also inside of the Ziploc bag is Diet Dr. Pepper, just free floating in there. It's not in a can, it's not in a bottle, it is in the bag. The bag is the bottle. And look, drinking things out of a bag is common, but pouring an entire Diet Dr. Pepper in a Ziploc bag that has the Tupperware container of your wife's lunch and then closing the Ziploc bag and putting it in her lunch bag and saying, "Here you go, honey, I packed your lunch," is divorce worthy to say the least. And by the way, most of these women look like they're teachers. This next woman is actually a Publix employee, and you can tell by her shirt.
Today my husband packed my lunch. Let's see what he packed me.
So this woman's husband packed her a long kind of popsicle. Is a Ziploc bag that you would use for a popsicle, but it's just long and it's full of cheese balls. And that's all that was shown in the TikTok compilation. This next woman is an office worker and she's unpacking her lunch. And she pulls out an almost empty bag of animal crackers and a Cliff Bar and 2 string cheese. That is it. The rest of her bag is completely empty. There's no drink in there, there's no fork, no knife, no nothing. Let's watch the next one. This next woman says, "My husband packed my lunch today. I only eat chocolate if it is cold. He did this." So this is kind of an example of like, okay, we've seen these crazy husbands pack the lunch for their wives. And now let's take a look at this normal husband who packed his wife a lunch. And she pulls out a can of cold Dr. Pepper, and there's a Reese's cup tied to the can of cold Dr. Pepper so that her chocolate will be cold. But that small detail of like him making sure that her chocolate was cold, because she doesn't have a lunch bag where he can like put cold stuff and have it be kept cold, is far more. And it's the tiniest detail. It's the tiniest detail, and it is far more effort that man put into packing his wife's lunch than all of the other men combined. So I just want to point that out. On the topic of lunch packing, let's take a look at this woman who has this awful husband, the worst kind of bad husband. So the caption says, "The teachers may not know mom is out of town, but there will be signs." And she starts off the TikTok basically showing lunchboxes that she personally packs for her kids. Each of these lunchboxes is quick and easy to make, but each lunchbox is highly personalized, not just with their lid colors, but also each kid gets their favorite snack. And the meals are healthy and filling. And then this is the lunchbox that her husband made for their kids. Let's take a look. It is a flimsy, plasticky lunchbox with a Lunchables inside it and a Go-Go Squeeze inside it. And then in the caption, in big text, she says, "This is the sign." Basically saying like, this is a sign that mom is out of town, is that the lunchboxes are not the fancy metal tin lunchboxes with different colored lids for each kid. Again, highly personalized. It's this cheap lunchbox, and he put a Lunchables inside it and a Go-Go Squeeze inside it. It's extra baffling to watch because you're left wondering where the fancy metal tin lunchboxes are and why he chose such a cheap lunchbox compared to the fancy ones that they already have and use every single day. This Lunchable has Ritz crackers, so tiny little things, and then tiny circles of ham, and then tiny squares of cheese. Compared to the bagel sandwiches that were in the fancy lunchboxes that are fulfilling, that have fresh tomato, fresh spinach, are carefully planned out and thought out, I would say that the Lunchables would not fill this kid. And of course, she presents it as kind of like a silly haha, like, "Oh my god, my husband is kind of incompetent, isn't that funny?" And the comments are like, this is not okay. Anyway, it's time to get into the speculation heavy portion of this episode. Reminder, please do not make any comments on their personal pages based off of what I'm about to say. So I've kind of talked about it before, but there are multiple reasons why people stay in such toxic relationships. But I want to talk about one in particular because these girls staying in these relationships, they're not, how do I put this? They're not being abused necessarily. It's not necessarily abuse. And so it's easier to get out of such a relationship because they're not, being financially abused, or at least from what we saw, it doesn't look like they're being financially abused, it doesn't look like they're being physically abused, it doesn't look like they're being mentally abused. You could make the argument that they're being emotionally abused, but for the most part, I don't think abuse is a factor that plays into why they're staying. And this is a very important conversation that we must have in order to talk about the other 2 episodes that we're going to talk about. So I think the reason why they're staying is because of misery. Now, I've talked in the past about having a couple of friends who were kind of very comfortable in their own misery. I was such a person that was very comfortable in my own misery, and this is a very common thing. It's a very common thing to just be in your misery, not want to improve, not want to change. I talked about it in my self-sabotage episode where it's titled, I Sabotage Myself a Lot, where it's basically me admitting that I sometimes don't want to improve because I'm like, well, I love my misery. Me and my misery are like this, But that's the side of things that I want to share, is that misery. The misery that plays such a big role in why these women are staying with such awful, awful men. I also, before we get into it, I don't want to victim blame, and I don't want it to come across as though I am victim blaming, because again, we're taking this conversation from the assumption that these women have not been abused. They are not experiencing abuse, and that they are choosing to stay. That it's not a situation of them having been manipulated into staying, it's them choosing to stay. And I'm choosing to talk about it in such a way in hopes of getting more and more people to re-examine why they're choosing to stay in not just toxic relationships, but toxic situationships. And that's what we're gonna talk about. So, like I said, oftentimes there's situations where your misery is your only comfort. And what do I mean by that? So as someone who has lived comfortably in misery, it's very hard to get out of that pattern because the misery that you're living in has taught you to survive in a certain way. So if you guys don't know, a lot of people who do suffer from like anxiety and depression and other mental illnesses, their brains are constantly in fight or flight. That is kind of the whole thing of anxiety, is that your brain is in constant fight or flight, and you're ready to run or freeze or, whatever reaction you might have. And this is because your brain perceives that there is danger around you, when in fact there is no danger around you. You could be in your own room, laying on your bed, browsing TikTok, and then suddenly your brain decides that you are in danger and that you need to hide or that you need to run. And so that kind of situation can make it so that your survival instincts are framed around that. And oftentimes, when your survival instincts are framed around this concept of you constantly being in danger, the best solution is for you to just stay still and for you to just not do anything. Because if you think about it, like in the wild, if you're a caveman or cavewoman and you sense that there's danger around you sense that there's a predator around you, maybe a lion or something, a very hungry lion, the worst thing for you to do as a biped human being is to run, because the lion is going to run faster than you. So the best thing for you to do is just hide in the bushes and wait for the lion to leave. That's kind of what this misery is it would be dangerous for you to run. It would be dangerous for you to progress. So the best and the safest option is for you to just sit still and wait. Basically, the way that we have evolved and the things that we have gone through and the things that our ancestors have gone through is informing the way that we react to toxic situations. And sometimes the way that we react to toxic situations create even more toxic situations because our brains don't really understand the difference. Our brains don't really understand that it is safe for us to change. Our brains have been programmed to take the path of least resistance and to believe that the path of least resistance is the safest path. And for some of these women and for some of us in toxic situations, the path of least resistance is staying exactly where you are. But obviously, staying exactly where you are when you're in a toxic situation is probably the worst thing you can do. If you have become so accustomed to just living in that misery and surviving based off of that misery, when you get out of that misery, you have to come up with an entirely new kind of survival strategy. Again, what I mean by that is your brain and how your brain thinks and how your brain feels comfortable in certain situations. A survival situation for anxiety would be taking anxiety medications or journaling or doing exposure therapy or just going to talk therapy. So if you are in a situation where you have been accustomed to maybe not the healthiest coping mechanisms, maybe in order to deal with your anxiety you doom scroll on TikTok, or you maladaptive daydream, if that is the case for you, if you then leave that situation, then you have to change. Okay, I'm leaving the situation because the coping mechanisms that I used here were maladaptive daydreaming and doom scrolling on TikTok. But that got me nowhere. I didn't progress. I regressed. I became even more anxious. I became agoraphobic. I couldn't leave my room at all. So I need to get out of the situation. But then you get into a different situation and you need to come up with better coping strategies. And that is the scary part. That is the part that feels like running from a lion. The acknowledgement of I can no longer doom scroll and maladaptive daydream. I actually need to go to therapy. But because you've been doom scrolling and maladaptive daydreaming for so long, going to therapy makes your anxiety worse. Like the thought of going to therapy makes your anxiety worse. So instead, you opt for, nah, I'm just going to continue maladaptive daydreaming and doom scrolling. And that is what I think is happening with these women, is that they have created coping mechanisms specific to their situation, specific to I have an awful husband. And also, I think the sunk cost fallacy also applies in this situation. And I've talked about the sunk cost fallacy before in my other installment of horrible boyfriends and horrible relationships. But what the sunk cost fallacy is basically if you spend long enough on something, it's harder for you to get out because you're thinking, well, I've already spent like 5 years in this relationship, 10 years in this relationship. We have kids. I might as well just keep going. I might as well just keep trying, right? So that, like, coping mechanisms specific to their awful husbands plus the sunk cost fallacy is what I think is making these women stay. Another big reason that I believe is contributing to these women staying in these awful relationships is the financial security that these awful relationships provide them. Yes, these relationships are awful. However, given the state of the economy right now, all around the world, not just in the United States, but especially in the United States, it does become a bit of a safety to have someone who is the one that's going to work and who is the one in charge of finances, so that added stress of taking care of the bills, worrying if you're going to have enough money to cover the bills, is not put on you. However, even though they do not have the extra added stress of paying bills, it seems as though they have more stress in their life because of what their husbands are doing or not doing. So again, it becomes a situation where it feels safer to stay in that toxic relationship, whether it be because of your coping mechanisms and because you're used to how you cope, or whether it be because of the financial crisis, but it ends up not being any safer, and it ends up just adding so much stress to your life and so much stress to your body that your body ends up kind of shutting down anyway. And that's something that I don't think is talked about enough when talking about toxic relationships, is that your body has a way of reacting to the extra stress, and that is simply just shutting down. Seeing all these comments being like, your husband fucking sucks, like, he's horrible, what are you doing still with him, like, you deserve better. That can be a very successful push in getting these women to get out of that relationship. But oftentimes, if they have developed such specific coping mechanisms to deal with their situation, and if they are stuck with those coping mechanisms, and if they feel attached to those coping mechanisms, then they can get defensive about it, and they can be like, no, you don't know my relationship. This is just a 10-second TikTok. It was a funny little TikTok that I posted. My husband is actually not horrible. He's actually the best person ever. You just don't know him like I know him. I love him. He loves me. We love each other, and we're going to stay together forever, which is what we have unfortunately seen. But let's talk about some of these specific coping mechanisms. Some of these coping mechanisms can be things like just imagining that you have a better relationship than you actually do, right? Romanticizing the good things and ignoring the bad things, which is why I also have previously talked about like the romanticization of your life, and like I have the pink jobs and he has the blue jobs, living the soft wife life, and he's my blue collar husband, or whatever the stupid ass trend. But you know, like the romanticizing, like, well, I get to stay at home and I get to bake sourdough bread and he gets to be the provider and all I have to do is keep the house clean, right? That kind of romanticizing can be a coping mechanism that a lot of these women are attached to, and that a lot of these women are attached to the aesthetic of, right? So even though they're living a super miserable life, they're probably thinking like, well, at least he provides, right? And they're justifying their misery because that's what they feel, what their brain thinks is the safest for them to do. It's all very interesting, and I do think that this conversation deserves so much nuance and so much care. Also what a lot of the times the misery can do is it can also blind you to the reality that you're living in. So, and this especially happens if your coping mechanisms revolve around telling yourself that you're living a different life. So if your husband packed you dog food for lunch and, you know, maybe that hurt your feelings, a lie that you tell yourself to feel better about your husband packing you dog food for lunch is, oh, my husband, isn't he so funny? He's a prankster. LOL. This is so funny. I actually really enjoy this joke. I actually really enjoy the prank that he pulled because he's very funny and I love him very much because he's very funny, right? And so again, that kind of defense mechanism, coping mechanism, is their survival strategy. It's the way that they tell their brain, no, everything's fine. I don't need to change. It's the way that they protect themselves and their brain from hurt and from harm, because going through a divorce is very hurtful. It's a lengthy process. Like I said, it's very expensive. So these women justify that by protecting themselves and telling themselves, no, this is fine. I like this. I like this about my husband. I like that my husband poured an entire Diet Dr. Pepper in a Ziploc bag because it's funny. It's him, you know? I like this. And then when they post that TikTok and they get a bunch of comments saying, girl, what? This is so bad. This is awful. You need to get up out of there as soon as you can. Like, as soon as possible, you need to get out of there. Then that reality that they have created for themselves, that reality of, no, guys, this is so funny. Isn't he such a prankster? Isn't he so cute? Starts to get shattered. And it starts to feel like a personal attack because it is a shield of delusion that these women have built for themselves. Not for the relationship, not for the survival of the relationship, but for the survival of themselves and the survival of their feelings. They don't want to get hurt by divorcing their husband. And, you know, also a lot of, in these communities where these women grew up, there's a lot of stigma surrounding divorce. So a lot of these women don't want to get divorced because they don't want to go through that stigma. They don't want their families to see them as a failure. They don't want to feel like a failure, because often in these communities, when women reach 30, when they reach 40 and they're unmarried, it becomes kind of like a, well, you must be horrible, then you must be used goods is what they call it. And so they also don't want to go through kind of the bullying of, well, I'm divorced and everybody sees me as a pariah, everybody sees me as a failure, I don't want to go through that. So in order to protect my reputation, my feelings. I'm going to create this shield of delusion and protect my marriage and pretend that my marriage is so good and so fine because I don't want to be known as the pariah that got divorced. So then when these outside commenters start saying, what are you doing? Like, you need to get divorced, that delusion starts to shatter and it starts to feel like a mirror is being put right in front of them and they're being told, look at yourself. Look at the misery that you're living in. This shield of delusion is delusional. You're not living in this fantasy land where you love your husband's pranks. You're not living in this delusional land where your husband packing you dog food is funny to you. You actually really hate that. What are you doing lying to yourself, telling you that you actually love your husband's jokes, right? And of course, disclaimer, speculation. For these women, it can also make them feel safer to believe that their life cannot improve. So when they see other women telling them, you deserve better, you can do better than him, it kind of actually hurts their feelings even more because that shield of delusion kind of relied on them believing that this was the best that it was going to get. It justifies them spending so much time with that miserable guy. But yeah, that is what I think. Like I said, this is all speculation. That is all what I think is happening to these women, and why these women are even tolerating this kind of treatment in the first place is because a lot of these women are doing it to protect their sanity and themselves and the way that they perceive their own relationship, and it's for survival. And I'm saying this because I was also in kind of a similar position, not with relationships, but with, different aspects of life where I was kind of sitting there like, no, this is fine. I'm so happy right now. And I was, maladaptive daydreaming, and I was like, no, this makes me so super happy, you guys. Like, this is so fun. I say you guys, but I had no friends. I wasn't telling anyone. So, yeah. We're going to talk about maladaptive daydreaming. Yeah, it's a really interesting coping mechanism that happens when you are in a horrible situation, but it feels safer to stay in that horrible situation than leaving that horrible situation and improving your life, because improving your life feels so scary and unknown, and your misery. You and your misery are like this, right? Your misery like the palm of your hand. Your misery like yourself. Your misery better than your misery knows itself. And so stepping out of that misery and stepping into the unknown, even if the unknown could be better, even if the unknown could be the best thing to ever happen to you, it feels scary. And so what a lot of people tend to do is a lot of people tend to stay in that misery because, well, this is safe here. I know what to expect and I don't have to take risks. What these women, I think, are going through is that they are so comfortable living in the world without risks, but often a world without risks is an unhappy world. Like, you have to try new things and do new things to find what you like, what you don't like. If let's do something that's relevant to my life. Say, for example, you listen to a lot of K-pop and you watch a lot of K-pop performances and you really love the choreography. That should motivate you to try out, like, okay, well, let me try out like a K-pop choreography, right? Oh, it turns out I actually kind of really like to dance, so let me look around and see if there's any like dance classes around me that I could go to. And then suddenly you're making dance friends, and those dance friends could be your friends for life, or they could be temporary friends that bring happiness into your life. But then through them you find new people, and those new people also improve your quality of life. That is what can happen if you take a risk. However, if you are comfortable in your misery, stepping outside of your comfort zone and going to a dance class might look like, oh, but I have to talk to a bunch of people, and a bunch of people are going to look at me dance, and what if I can't dance good? And what if I'm just too fat to dance? What if they make fun of me because I'm fat? Or what if they make fun of me because I suck at dancing? Whole time it's like a beginner class and nobody in that class knows how to dance, but you're just so in your own head about like, oh, but I suck. I suck at everything. I suck at, like, I love watching these K-pop choreographies, but I'm never going to do them because I suck at dancing, and I don't want to improve at dancing, but because I don't want people to perceive me, and I don't want people to, look at me, and I don't want people to judge me. I can judge myself well enough, thank you very much, right? So then you end up not taking the risk, and then you end up not getting to know those people, and you end up not getting to, make that positive change in your life where you're not only moving your body, but you're also meeting new people, and you're, talking to people, and you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, and you're becoming not agoraphobic, but the opposite of agoraphobic. But yeah, that is what I think is happening to these women, and I think that is a point of conversation that I think we need to have. And I'm saying a lot of I think because, like I said, this is speculation. I don't actually know these women. I watched like 30 seconds of their life, and so I don't actually know, like, what if they divorced their husband? What if that woman who cracked a raw egg on her table was like, oh, this is the final straw, goodbye, right? Like, I don't know that because I haven't also gone to their page and seen, like, oh, look, what are they doing now? So it's all speculation, but it's speculation based off of what I have lived through what my other friends have lived through, and these are friends who are also, have been very comfortable in their misery. Me, myself, being very comfortable in my misery, and like what my thought process was, what my friends' thought process was. I did want to show you guys TikToks of women leaving their husbands, but this episode is almost 2 hours long, so I think I'm just going to cut it off here. But there are multiple TikToks of women who have left and who say that their life has improved so much after leaving. And if you are in such an unhappy relationship, such as these women that I showed you guys, the best thing you can do for yourself and your mental health is to leave. Even if you think your husband is the best, which he probably isn't. If you feel unhappy in your relationship, even if you believe that your husband or your partner or your spouse or whatever is the best person ever, the best thing that you can do for yourself is to get out of that situation, or at the very least have a conversation with your partner and see if you can come up with a game plan of like, okay, if I don't feel better about this relationship by such and such point, the best thing to do is to divorce, right? And then go from there, because change is always going to bring positive results, even if the change doesn't feel good in the moment. And I should know because I'm going through change right now. I'm trying to not self-sabotage so much. It's I'm making progress, ? It's the best you can do for yourself, and I think you should go for it, and I think you should do it. But anyway, that is all that I have for you guys today. Tune in next week where we talk about more of these people who have been hating on these relationships, and we talk about, what that looks like on TikTok and maybe why they have been hating on relationships, and is it worthy? Like, is it a good thing to be hating on these relationships, or is it doing more harm than good? And so that's what we're going to talk about next week. And I hope to see you there. And as I said in the beginning, make sure to check out the links in my description, because that's where my new social media account will be, where you can keep up with updates on my channel. So if anything is delayed, or if I decide, I'm going to take a break, I'm not really feeling like I should podcast, that is where that information will be. And yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!